For Inside Carolina, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and this is Up in the Rafters, where I'm joined by Carolina basketball legend and 2017 national champion Justin Jackson. Today, we also have a big special guest. We have Mr. College Basketball himself, Tate Frazier, another Carolina alum, the host of the One Shining podcast on the Ringer Network. We're going to preview this NCAA tournament with Tate for UNC fans that still want to follow the tournament and maybe help them fill out a bracket so they can win their work pools or whatever pools they have with their friends. Tate, no Carolina. We were kind of talking about a pre-show. Selection Sunday, it's normally a joyous day once that bracket comes out, not so much this year. How did that affect your general feelings when you first saw the bracket come out?
First off, I would like to say Justin Jackson, 2017 national champion, is the face of college basketball in my mind. You know what I mean? I still beckon back to a better time in college basketball. But yeah, you mentioned it. Selection Sunday, no Carolina blue on the board, other than the first four out. You hate to see that. I keep going back to a number that I love. That's 131. That's the most tournament wins all time. North Carolina has that record. So hopefully Kentucky loses in the first round and they have no chance to break that. But yeah, it's a tough year. We expected more. We hoped for more. It's 2023. It's a Jordan year. We all thought that this would be the year that we go to Houston, get some redemption for 2016. It's not going to happen, but it's still going to be a good tournament, and we can all be good sports, right? That's the best thing we can do. That's what Roy Williams and Dean Smith and Coach Davis would want. So we'll be good sports. We'll watch the tournament. We'll support, and we'll pull against Duke. That's all we can do.
Justin, I want to ask you, how do you fill out a bracket? Do you go round by round or region by region?
Um, Normally I just go round by round. And normally years prior to this year, I think I realized as I was filling out this bracket that I'm not very, I don't think I'm like certified to really be a legit college basketball um, bracketologist. There's some teams on here I don't think I watched a single game. To be honest, I was so like focused on UNC. But yeah, I just take it round by round, and sometimes I'll pick like two or three upsets that I just really want to see. I really have no idea if they really have the ability to do it, but I got a couple in there, so we'll see. We'll see how this bracket turns out.
Hey, what's your viewing like for college basketball? Because I love the sport, but even sometimes I feel overwhelmed once Selection Sunday comes, where it's like Kansas State felt like a top 25 team all year, and it feels like I didn't even watch them.
Yeah,
How are you kind of taking in college basketball with the college basketball podcast?
Yeah, my goal and my hope is to watch at least one full game of every team that's going to be in the tournament. That's kind of how I view it. So, and I'll check back in like as injuries, as we know things evolve during the season. Usually have your guys in January. There'll be one guy that opts out or transfers, like Sky Clark at Illinois this year. There's always one of those storylines you have to keep up with. But yeah, I mean, even when I look at this bracket, like there's a team in Utah State that I wish I watched one Utah State game. I wish I knew more about Utah State. I wish I knew more about Boise State. Those are probably two teams that I would say are my blind spots. But for whatever reason, when I saw Northwestern Boise State, I haven't seen much of Boise State, but I'm like, they're going to beat Northwestern. That's kind of how my brain works sometimes. It's like the less I know, the better, with some of these teams. So yeah, we're all just throwing shit at the wall at the end of the day, right? Nobody knows anything. It's college basketball. Even the people that do know less. And you could convince me just by looking at this bracket that Princeton is going to beat Arizona, and I'm not going to argue it because anything is possible. It's college basketball. That's why it's the best.
Yeah, and what I fall victim to when I'm filling out a bracket is if I'm betting on teams. If a team burned me in the one time I bet them, I'm out. Illinois, I'm out.
Yeah.
I watched them one game against Penn State, probably the only game I saw them. Won't pick them now for the tournament. But Justin, you went to a Final Four. You went to two Final Fours. You went to two championship games. You won a championship. What qualities would you say you're looking for in a tournament team?
Um, I think the biggest thing is shot making. When you look at kind of the teams that we had as far as the success that we had in those 2 years that we made it to the championship, um, we had guys who could make shots. Obviously, we had the legend himself, Marcus, in 2016, who hit. If we hadn't have lost the game, it would have been the best shot in the history of college basketball. and then you had myself who could score a little bit. You had Joel who played really well that game, and then you had a guy like Bryce who you could give the ball on the block and they could go score at any time. And then it was kind of the same situation the next year. Like you just had Joel, you had myself, you had Isaiah, you had Kennedy, you had a bunch of guys that could just go get a bucket. And so I think that's the number one thing that I see is just shot making. So when I look at teams, if I see guard play that, they can make, take and make tough buckets, I think that's kind of the biggest thing for me is, obviously in the tournament, anything can happen and anybody can get hot. But if you have guys that consistently have been able to score the ball, I think that's going to give you more success through the tournament.
Moving to the first region that we'll look at, the South region. Tate, Alabama, they're the number 1 overall seed. How likely do you think it is that Alabama will be the team cutting down the nets, and kind of what are the Crimson Tide's strengths?
I am very worried that it's inevitable that Alabama is going to win the national championship. That's how good Alabama is. If you didn't watch the SEC tournament championship game, don't watch it because it'll terrify you about how good they are. Alabama, they are the fastest team in the country. They get the most possessions in the country, and they also have, I think, one of the best depth in the country when you talk about their big men. They got this guy Pringle coming off the bench, and you forget about him half the time. Bediako, their big, can control games himself. And when you talk about Brandon Miller, he's the best player in this draft. He's a 6'9" shooting guard when he goes to the NBA, but right now he's playing like a hybrid 3-4. And sometimes his best offense is taking a three that he misses. He follows his shot. He gets his own rebound, and then they get another possession because that's what they do. They just want to have as many possessions as possible. The thing about Alabama, though, is that they have a kryptonite in the South, which is a team that we're all familiar with. We all know them very well. It's Tony Bennett's Virginia team. If Virginia gets matched up with Houston, I think they're the one team that can squeeze the possessions out of this team, show how young they are by limiting those possessions, and then maybe, just maybe, Virginia can sneak by and get a win over them. But I'm very worried about Alabama just running through this tournament because that's how good they are.
Well, I guess my going to the Virginia, so I have hard feelings towards Virginia just from having to play against them. I love Coach
Right.
Bennett and that staff. They're super cool. But I honestly, I don't know if I can believe in Virginia to make it that far, man. Like, I
Right.
think when I look at the bracket, like, I feel like I'm kind of worried about that first round. Like, you know what I
Furman.
mean? Like, I just, like, going back to my whole shot making thing, I just don't know if they've got enough scoring. Like, obviously, your pack line defense is great for the regular season, but you got to be able to score the ball, right? Like, I just don't, I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are.
You're
You watch
asking a
way more
lot of Reese
basketball.
Beekman, basically, right? At this point, you're hoping that Reese Beekman is a guy that makes some shots for you, or that Kihei Clark, who's been there since you were playing, can make some shots.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, that's my concern as well. It's like Virginia's the kryptonite of an Alabama team, just the way that they play, but also can they beat Furman? And then if they beat Furman, can they beat San Diego State, right? Or beat Charleston, whoever they get matched up with.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the style that UVA plays, they really can't separate from teams. It's why they lose to UMBC. It's why they can win the national title the next year when they have all that talent. So that's always going to be interesting. My sleeper in the South, Tate, I want to get your opinion on it.
Yeah.
Creighton. It seems like they're starting to come on strong. They got Nemhard at their point, Kalkbrenner as the big. Obviously, Carolina fans are probably going to be watching that first round matchup against NC State, and in a shocking twist because of the 2011 tournament, they might be rooting for Creighton actually. What's your feelings on the Blue Jays?
Yeah, Creighton, I love their starting five. Like you said, Ryan Nimhard is a true point guard. He gets steals, he initiates the offense, gets everybody involved, guy that can make shots. Their two guy, Trey Alexander, is an NBA two guard, maybe a combo guy, but regardless, he can get you buckets, he can get you points. Baylor Shireman is a guy that, he transfers from the Jackrabbits. He was looked at Duke, he looked at Kentucky, he should have looked at Carolina because he was the perfect Brady Manick replacement. A guy that shoots over 40% from three, takes a lot of threes, makes a lot of threes. Art Kaluma's their power forward. He's a nice switchable four for them. And then, of course, they have a 7-footer in Kalkbrenner. They lost 7 games in a row, but that was because Kalkbrenner had mono. So if you look at their record, you say, oh, well, this team, they're not that great, but in reality, they really are. They just had, kind of this weird slip in December. But they took Arkansas when Arkansas was 100% to the brink and then beat them in Maui. Saw that in person. That got my attention. I actually feel bad for Creighton. I thought they got a pretty bad draw to get NC State in the first round. And Kalkbrenner is a very finesse big, right? And I think DJ Burns is the opposite of a finesse big. So if you have that matchup, I kind of like that matchup for NC State. But I have seen that if you front DJ Burns, it changes the whole dynamic of who NC State is. And I think Greg McDermott will front him. He'll probably put someone like Kaluma on him, more athletic, and just see what happens and front him the entire time. So that's my only concern with Creighton. With NC State, that's a tough matchup. But if Creighton gets by State, Creighton has a nice path, and they have a great starting five. Worry about their depth, but they got a good coach. They got a great starting five, and they know how to win. So, yeah, they're a scary 6 seed.
Man, I don't know if I can put as much trust in NC State as you are with DJ Burns, man. I think
I mean, it is NC State. That's at the end of the day, we know who it is. Yeah,
it's NC State. They're going to end up being who we know they are. It's one of those things. But I think on my bracket, I've got obviously Creighton. I've got Creighton making it through that. I've got them running into Arizona, which my guy Coach Rob is out there, man. Like he recruited me. What was that? That would have been 10 years ago almost. Wow. 10, 11 years ago. He recruited me. He was the main guy that I talked to at UNC. So for me, it's like I have to show a little love to Coach Rob, even though he's not in Carolina Blue anymore. And I actually have a shocker. I have them beating Alabama. I don't – maybe it's just me being naive and not watching enough of college basketball, but I don't know. I feel like, what do you think you think Arizona gives this field any kind of fear, or do you think they're more of an underlooked type of team?
I think the best thing that's happening for Arizona is they might be underlooked, and in reality, they have the best front court in the country. And you mentioned Coach Rob. Coach Rob is a great big man coach. If you heard Armando Bacot all season long, every time he's asked about his rebounding principles, he talks about Coach Rob. So that says something about him. And what's great about Arizona is their big Tubelis runs the court a lot like Tyler Zeller. He beats everybody down the floor. They play a great high-low game with him and Ballo. He's kind of like a point forward four. He's going to go left, but he still goes left. He's very, he's just one of those guys where I really like the way that Tubelis plays and orchestrates the offense. The only problem with Arizona is that Kerr Kriisa is on the team, and Kerr Kriisa can shoot them out of any game. I've seen him do it. I've seen him do it live. They're the classic. We're up 15 points, and Kerr Kriisa says, "Now it's my time." And that's the only scary part about Arizona. But I have them winning the national championship. I really do. And every tournament they've played in this year, they've won. I talked to Tommy Lloyd in Maui. He said that, the lesson they learned last year was to basically stop saying how great they are to each other. Just consider themselves not to be that good. They win Maui. They didn't play their best. They win the Pac-12 tournament. They didn't play their best. I think in this tournament, you talk about shot makers. They got Courtney Ramey. Kerr Kriisa can be a shot maker, even when, he can be a disaster also. But they got this 17-year-old point guard, Killian Boswell, who's a 5-star kid. He kind of is the true point guard, I think, for this team. And as we get into the tournament, I think he can steady the ship for them. And I like Arizona a lot. And I feel like a lot more people like Arizona than I thought. Like even Jay Billis had them winning the championship. So maybe America has figured out that the bigs matter, and they got the best bigs in the country.
If Arizona is underrated, I've got Baylor as overrated. According to KenPom, they have the number 2 offense, the number 104 defense, a drastic difference from your offense and defense. When we talked about the skewed view of a team through the betting lens, I think I bet on Baylor every time they played Iowa State and every time they got absolutely smoked by Iowa State. Are you of the notion that Baylor is a little overrated?
I think Baylor as the 3 seed is insane. And if I was the committee, I think Duke should have been that 3 seed, to be quite honest with you. I think Duke as a 5 seed after winning the ACC tournament is the most ridiculous thing I've ever been a part of. And this whole quadrant system, net system that is basically Big Ten propaganda at this point and Mountain West propaganda, I'm over it, and it all starts with the seeding of this tournament. Baylor being a 3 over Duke, who won the ACC tournament, like I said, that makes no sense to me. I think Baylor's been a little overrated all year. They've had injuries. They don't play defense. They don't have any discipline. They have a lot of five-star blue chipper, personalities that are not meshing with the guys who have been tried and true in that program. I think Scott Drew's being recruited by other blue bloods. I won't say who at the moment. So I think he might be a little bit distracted. I think UC Santa Barbara with Joe Pasternak, that's an upset I like to see with the Gauchos. When he took that job 6 years ago, he came from Arizona. He was, in the Sean Miller world, but they had won 6 games, and now they've won 20 straight games, 4 straight seasons. They should have won in the tournament against Creighton in 2021. They lost by 1 point. They were up for the majority of that game. So I like Santa Barbara as an upset in the first round there over Baylor.
Is that your biggest upset in the first round for this region?
That's my biggest upset. I do have a Colgate, Texas has my attention, but I'm afraid to pull the trigger on it, just because Texas has 3 great guards that can make some very tough shots. But Colgate has my attention as a 15-2.
Wow. Okay, that's funny because I actually have Texas going all the way to the Final Four.
But we've seen we all know how we know, like, if Texas didn't have Texas on their jerseys, I would take them maybe to win the national championship. That's how talented they are. But when I see Texas in March, I think of Abilene Christian. I think of Nick Young, Taj Gibson on USC against Kevin Durant, right? It's not Texas's fault. It's my own fault for watching them lose so much.
That's valid. That is a valid point. I think for me, that team it's going to be a weird take, but an overrated team for me is Purdue. And the reason I say that is because obviously you have Big Fella, who is probably going to win Player of the Year. He's completely dominated college basketball. But when I look at their guard play, it's like, who are we getting? Right? Like, okay, we've got somebody that can enter the ball into Zach Edey, but if you double and triple team him and he kicks it out, is anybody going to be able to produce? I actually, unfortunately, I have Duke beating them, I think, in the, what is that? This Sweet 16. But I think for me, I think they're one of the more overrated teams, which is a wild thing to say as a number 1 seed.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Matt Painter because he's such a good basketball coach, and they kind of overachieved this year. They weren't even ranked at the start of the year, and now they're a 1 seed. So it's a little bit unfair. I think you're 100% right, though. And the game that I have circled is Memphis. I think Memphis's backcourt with Kendrick Davis and Alex Lomax, those veterans, they're going to pick up 94 feet against Braden Smith and against Fletcher Lawyer. And they got Brandon Newman, who I think will be a nice piece for them. Mason Gillis is a nice piece, but Purdue I worry about. I worry about the Big Ten in general always when it comes to
the Big Ten is going to embarrass themselves come tournament time. It's what they do every year. I'll say what's on everybody's mind. I think what we're all worried about. It feels like this region is shaping up for Duke to make a run. You have the weakest 1 seed in Purdue. You have a Tennessee team where Zakai Ziegler, their starting point guard, out for the year in a potential second round matchup. When do we start the panic meter for Duke making a run? Because all of a sudden their NBA talent is playing like NBA talent. Tyrese Proctor became an NBA prospect overnight, it feels like. So when do we start worrying about a potential Duke run, Tate?
I think we know that Duke, you should go ahead and in pin, or as Seth Davis says in Sharpie, go ahead and put Duke in the Sweet 16. We know that's going to happen. They're going to be in the second weekend. And then the Purdue game, I pray, I hope, I wish that Zach Edey doesn't have 2 fouls by the under 15, but we know that's going to happen. Zach Edey's going to be in foul trouble. He's going to be on the bench. And then Duke, who played Purdue already this year and lost to them, is going to have the perfect opportunity for a redemption game. John Shire is going to be the darling of the media. We know how this is all going to go. And then we're going to get to the Elite Eight. And I think at that point, that's when we have to all lock in as America and realize that Shaka Smart, much like Brad Stevens in back in 2010, was our one shining hope here. I think Shaka Smart and Marquette have to stop Duke in the Elite Eight. I really do. And if they don't do it, then we have to hope that Arizona, who owns Duke in the tournament, stops them in the Final Four. But I don't want Duke to get to Houston. I don't want John Shire to have the same treatment that Hubert did, being able to make a Final Four in his first year. So please, Marquette, please, Purdue, Please, Louisiana, when they upset Tennessee, somebody stop Duke. That's all we can have.
What about Max Asmus? Any chance?
I think there's a chance, but I think that we're all on it. You know what I mean? Like, too many people have told Duke how good Oral Roberts is, and they're not going to be surprised by this team. And when you've won 17 straight, you're due a loss. No offense. You know, like, even when you win a conference tournament, you go into the tournament, you're almost due a loss. And that's what I worry about with Oral Roberts. They feel like they're due.
Well, I think, and this is where I think I don't know if I'm cut out for bracketology, but I think Kansas State is going to be our savior.
I
I
hope so.
honestly, I haven't watched. I don't know if I've watched one game of Marquette, so this is kind of a bold take. Um, but I called, and Vip can be my witness. I called Kansas State being my sleeper um, going into the tournament.
Mm.
And with the way my bracket is going, I have Kansas State beating Duke in the Elite Eight to then go to the Final Four. So that's what I'm putting my hope in Kansas State. Coach Tang actually recruited me. It's actually crazy now that I'm so far removed from college basketball how many of these coaches I actually communicated with. I didn't even realize Pasternak was a head coach, and he recruited me when he was at Arizona.
Right.
But the way Coach Tang has Kansas State playing, once again, guard play. You've got Keontae Johnson, then you've got some bigs that just kind of play their role. It might be a stretch, but I think I got to put my hope in them. You think they're a legitimate contender if they make it through Marquette?
Yeah, I think so. And I think they've almost been disrespected a little bit, especially Jerome Tang. I think I saw people maybe back in February saying he was coach of the year, but as the end of the season came around, it was less and less, more Shaka Smart, more other names, Matt Painter being thrown to the front of the fray and not really Jerome Tang. But he's really that dude. He's really, all the players like him. I appreciated how he approached the Kansas rivalry where he's like, stop talking about Kansas, talk about us. I think that's what you like about him. And the cool thing about the bracket, the way it worked out, is if you just put Wildcats in the Sweet 16, you can be right no matter what, because Kentucky Wildcats, Kansas State Wildcats, whatever it is, the Wildcats are going to be there in the end. They're a really good team. Keontae Johnson has one of the best stories in basketball. I mean, we all remember what happened at Florida. For him to transfer, for him to come back, for him to be an NBA prospect at this point, I don't think we're talking about that enough. So I think it also feels like something where Duke could get Kansas State in the Elite Eight, and they already are celebrating, right? They're already like, we're going to the Final Four. This is our year. John Shire, destiny, and Kansas State smacks them in the mouth because the Big 12 is the best conference. So I like that pick. If you're one of the people that bets on conferences, then the Big 12 is the conference to bet on minus Baylor.
I think the feeling that we all have is it's not going to be Purdue. So if it's not, like, let's get that out of our mind right now. It's not going to be Purdue,
which means it might be this year. This is the first time we've all decided that it's not going to be them, and maybe it is. That's how it works.
So if it's not Purdue, if it's not Kansas State, what would the elevator pitch be for a team like Marquette? Because I kind of fall into the trap when I'm filling out my bracket with such recency bias. I just look at the conference champions, and I get to the Final Four, and I'm like, oh, all four of my teams are four conference champions. So what would the elevator pitch be for Marquette?
Yeah, Marquette at the start of the year, they were a great offensive team, but not a great defensive team. And that was kind of the knock on them. They were like in the hundreds in KenPom efficiency. But since February, they've been in the top 30, and they've really turned it up on the defensive end. They can pick up full court. They have depth. Shaka's not afraid to trap guys. He's not afraid to speed a game up. He's not afraid to throw wrinkles at you. I just think Shaka is an active coach, energized coach, and they have a steady point guard in Tyler Kolek, who's the Big East Player of the Year. He can get people involved. He can have those, 6+ assist games. They have a big in Iguodaro who is a switchable big. He can switch out on the guards. He's very long. They're a very long team. And like I said, they really just picked it up on the defensive end. They always had the offense down, but now they're clicking as a group defensively. They've been working with the Bucks. They got like the Giannis Antetokounmpo, cloud around them. I like that championship crowd in Milwaukee. I just like what Shaka's doing. So my elevator pitch would be that Shaka is the coach of the year in my mind, not just in the Big East but in the country. And we're probably gonna have a national coach of the year showdown between Jerome Tang and Shaka Smart in the Sweet 16. So whoever wins that game should be coach of the year in my mind. Marquette's got the players. I worry about the Big East being a little bit down, but at the same time, I think they're a really tough team. And Marquette and Shaka are both due for a run in March. So why not this year? Why not this year?
I always respected Shaka. Shaka was one of the most energetic. It seemed like the players liked him the most
Yeah.
when he went to different programs. So I always loved the way that Shaka coached. Um, I think moving to the Midwest, maybe it's because I know and I've seen games of most of these teams. I think this is going to be one of the more difficult to decipher when it comes to teams making it out of this.
Right.
Obviously, you see U of H number one, but then somebody also that I obviously watching ACC play, I really like Miami. Like I
Mm.
really like Miami. Once again, maybe it's just because I'm biased to the guard play, but I really like them. But then you see three different Texas teams in here, which I'm also kind of biased to being from Texas. But who do you think is kind of the dark horse making it out of that Midwest?
Yeah, I got Miami coming out of the Midwest, and that's only because of the situation with Marcus Sasser. And I talked to some Houston people. They said he's going to be 100%, but whenever there's a growing injury,
Yeah.
it's very easy to tweak it, and I don't like that. And he's very necessary to their five. They need him as the one that kind of opens up those bigs and opens up those lanes for them. So I worry about Houston a little bit. I don't think they're going to lose like to Iowa in the second round or Auburn in the second round. I don't really see that happening. But I think when they play Miami, if they could get Norchad Omir back also, who is got an ankle injury and he's one of their most important players. But apparently he's going to play. Might not play in the first game, but should play in the second game. I think a lot of people are picking Drake to upset Miami. And I think Miami has the talent and the athletes to make Tucker DeVries, who's the coach's son, look like, Bryce Alford out there, right? I think that's more likely than Drake upsetting Miami, in my opinion. So I think Miami will get through there. I think Indiana's got a really tough draw with Kent State. So I have Kent State beating Indiana, which is going to save Miami in that second round game potentially. Then they could get Houston. If they get by Houston, they'll have either Texas or I have Xavier getting there, in the Elite Eight in the bottom half of the bracket. So I think it could break Miami's way. I think Larinaga is one of the best coaches in the tournament, and he's someone that's going to get the most out of those guys. And you need guard play. You need guys that make free throws late in games. Nigel Pack's like 95% this season from the free throw line. I mean, they have like all these little things that you check the box. And Larinaga is the king of you go on a 5-0 run when we have an 11-point lead, timeout. He just kills momentum all the time. He did it to Carolina. He made us look dumb. So I expect him to make other people look dumb as well. I like Miami winning the Midwest.
I have to admit, I had Drake in this first round matchup. The betting line is only -2 Miami, probably because of Omir's status being in question and how old that Drake team is. But then another thing I fall victim to, the social media hype videos. I saw Miami's video, and Justin, I'll have to send it to you after. It's basically them saying like, "You haven't picked us before, don't start now." I saw the video, didn't pick them before, but I'm not listening to the video because now I think they're my Final Four team. I went from thinking, oh, Drake is going to beat them to now they do have the experience. They're coming off an Elite Eight appearance, the first in school history. I'm down here in Miami. You wouldn't know it because nobody talks about this team really. But all of a sudden I'm watching that video and it kind of got to me. It kind of spoke to me. But Tate, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the Omir injury. Do you ever feel guilty about giving people tips when they're asking you, knowing that once you tell them something, they're just going to go race and change their bracket? And you have in this region, Sasser questionable, Omir questionable. You look further, UCLA with Clark. How do you kind of handle that internal conflict when people are asking you, knowing that you are going to single-handedly change their brackets?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I'm down to be the blame. I'm down to be the fall guy. You can point the finger at me. I will take and I will shoulder that burden because I really don't care. You know, at the end of the day, we all have no idea what's going to happen. It is the biggest crapshoot in sports. That's why it's so much fun. I could argue either way for every one of these games. That's what Titus and I thought about doing that one year where he picked one team and I picked the other team and we just argued against each other. And you know, it's like that would be a show. And you could argue, you could find right? All stats are just cherry picking your own opinion that you already have preconceived and then using these stats to make yourself look smart and make yourself feel like you're right, right? We're all doing that. So I don't know. It's one of those things where I understand it. I am down to give people the tips, tell them what's going to happen. It's not always going to happen the way that you expect. I mean, UCLA, like you mentioned, Jalen Clark, I had them winning the championship 2 weeks ago. I thought they were going to win the national championship. Clark goes down. That changes the whole complexion of their team. But weirdly, if UCLA still went on to the Final Four and still went to the national championship game, it wouldn't break my brain or blow my mind because of the depth that they have. And the guy who's coming in after Clark is Amari Bailey, who was a top 10 ESPN 100 recruit who scored 26 points in his debut starting in the Pac-12 tournament. You know what I mean? So that's the other part of this. Even when you have the injuries, there's usually some other guy that steps up. I mean, even with Houston, if Sasser's out, Jamal Shed, that doesn't mean Jamal Shed's not going to step up and now score 10 more points than he probably would have. Or Tremont Mark steps up, or Jarris Walker, who's now looking like a lottery pick, steps up and fills that void. So even when you have the things that you can point to and say this injury is going to affect this and yada, 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 there's still reasons why. I mean, Jordan Miller for Miami might go off in round one, have 30 points, right? And then nobody cares that Norchad's not playing, right? Yeah. We're just like, okay, who cares? You know, they got this other guy who just scored 30. That's what I want to talk about. So that's how it works, and we know how it goes in college basketball. So I'm okay with it.
And March Madness, they're made for these Cinderella type teams where players kind of catch you off guard. I mentioned not watching, I don't think, any Kansas State games. Admittedly, the team that I have watched a bunch, I've watched Kent State probably 10 times just because of how much I love Sincere Carry. I've been screaming it from the rooftops to people anytime they ask me about this bracket. Like, if there's one player you have to watch, it's Sincere Carry. What can you tell people about Sincere Carry? Because when I tell people, I just say he's a bucket. He's going to get you a bucket whenever he wants.
Yeah, I think you know, to shades of give him another comp that maybe people know is like a Jelly Walker, who of UAB fame. You know, Jelly didn't make the tournament this year. They lost to Florida Atlantic. So I think he's one of those guys. He's also got the best name in the tournament potentially. There's a lot of good options. You got Boots Radford, you got Boo Booey, you know, you got Dane Danger. There's a lot of good names in the tournament that you can lean on, but Sincere Carry might be the best. And it just feels like Kent State this game was perfectly scheduled for Kent State for the upset. Their coach went to Albany. He graduated from Albany. The game's in Albany, New York. If you ever know anything about Indiana basketball, they hate New York and they hate New York basketball. So you're sending Indiana to New York and against a team that wants some sort of redemption for 2002, has all this history. Their fans are fired up. Sincere Carry's the perfect player to hit 6 threes in this game and make, you know, Indiana get tight and lose. So my thoughts are Sincere Carry is one of those guys that is going to be in one shining moment, is probably going to be, you know, a star of the tournament. One of those names we all remember in a couple weeks.
I love that. So you have Miami leaving that region to go to the Final Four. Okay. Yeah. So I've got Texas. Maybe I like that's a recency bias. Got watching them the way that they beat up on Kansas, which obviously moving to the West is the #1 seed. I don't really know. I've talked about this a lot. Kansas has obviously, they've been kind of in the conversation of #1 kind of the whole season. Obviously beat us last year in the championship. I don't know how much I trust them going into the tournament when it comes to obviously you have Jalen Wilson, first team All-American. He's going to do what he, you know, has been doing. But then you've got guys who they've relied on as far as Grady Dick, who's been struggling recently. You've got a point guard, which honestly makes me feel old, but a point guard that actually played with my brother in AAU that rarely even looks at the basket to score. And then outside of that, you have a 6'4", 5-man who doesn't score a ton. And so I think for me, when I look at this West, I think it's kind of up for grabs. I think it's one of those where it's like even teams, if you were to look ahead, like man, if we were to run into the number one seed in our region, I'm not too afraid of Kansas.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe you've obviously watched way more of these teams in this region, but I think that would be my mindset going into this region. Like I'm not, even if I'm Howard, like I'm not necessarily afraid of Kansas being the number one seed in this region.
Yeah, shout out to Howard. First tournament since 1992. I wasn't even born the last time they played in March Madness, so I was excited to see them in. I think it's fun that they're playing the reigning national champs. That'll be a fun game. Yeah, Kansas. My biggest concern is not really the team and the way they're structured. It's more about their coach. I mean, Bill Self had a minor heart procedure, is what they're calling it. They said they had to put stents in. I just think that is a bigger wrinkle than we all want to admit. And I think if Bill Self was 100% and they were playing like they were at the end of February and all things were hunky dory, I would take Kansas to win this region and go to the Final Four. But with that, a whole sidebar that's going on there, and the fact that Grady Dick, like you said, has not been playing his best basketball, it feels like he hit that freshman ceiling, that wall, whatever you want to call it. So that is concerning about Kansas. And weirdly, it reminds me of Villanova in 2017 after they won the championship in 2016. They come back in 2017. They play Wisconsin in the second round. It's a game that they should have won. They just don't play well. And then when it gets late, Nigel Hayes has this great, he called it the Michael Jordan baseline spin move, but he did it, at about two times, half the speed. But, point still stands. He got the bucket. Wisconsin wins. They knock out Villanova. It feels like Kansas could have that with an Illinois or an Arkansas, just because Arkansas has legit 4 NBA players that will be playing in that game. Illinois will have 3 NBA players that are playing in that game. And I think if you're Kansas, you don't have the same depth that you typically do. You got some guys off the bench. My guy, MJ Rice, McDonald's All-American. They got some guards and wings that they can throw in, but they haven't gotten the consistent minutes. They don't have a traditional big. So if Illinois has Dane Danger rolling, or, if Arkansas can find something, from their backcourt with Anthony Black and Nick Smith, that could be a tough second-round matchup. I feel like if you're UConn, if you're Gonzaga, you're excited about being in this region. And I think you think it could break your way. I know UConn plays Rick Pitino in the first round. That's tough. But Gonzaga, the Grand Canyon forgot all their equipment, apparently. So Gonzaga is about to play Grand Canyon without their equipment. So that's a first round win if I've ever heard one. That's basically a bye. So if you don't believe in Kansas, maybe this is the year you believe in Gonzaga to win that regional, because it does seem more wide open, especially with the UCLA injuries too,
You mentioned UConn. They have to get past Iona, Rick Pitino in the first round. According to KenPom, they're KenPom's number 4 team. Would you say you're buying or selling the Huskies as a potential Final Four team from this region?
In the same way that Kirk Kriisa is a wild card and can, keep Arizona from winning a game, Dan Hurley is the exact same wild card. I think Dan Hurley could lose UConn a game, just by being too fiery, getting thrown out of a game, getting 2 technical fouls, whatever it may be. Dan Hurley, he can do that. And that's my one concern. And the real concern I have is that he goes up against Rick Pitino, who's more of a master than, a peer, right? That's someone that his dad coached along with. So that's strange. The second round game potentially would be against Randy Bennett, who's one of the best coaches in college basketball, has, I think, that most active wins currently in college basketball with Boeheim being gone. So those are 2 coaches that Dan Hurley is going to have an insecurity about coaching against, in my opinion. So I worry about him doing too much and not letting his players who are more talented go win the game for him. If he keeps it in check, I know he's been taking like counseling and things like that, and he's trying not to call refs clowns anymore. He said he was gonna get clown out of his vocabulary. I appreciate that. I'm sure the refs do as well. Maybe they can put it all together. They have the team to do it. I mean, Hawkins is like a Rip Hamilton archetype. They remind me of the 04 UConn team. They have a great inside-out game. They have some shot makers. They have some great X factors. Caravan's one of those guys that can get hot for them. I mean, they're a fun team. And Klingon, the 7-footer off the bench. They have Sonogo. They have Klingon. They have 2 bigs. I think to win this year, you're going to have 2 or 3 legit bigs, especially if you have to play against a team like Purdue that has Edey. Going to have the fouls. So UConn checks all the boxes to win. They're top 20 defense in KenPom, top 20 in offense in KenPom. That's usually a recipe to win the national championship. So if you're a Huskies fan, I think you feel excited, but you're also probably pretty pissed about the draw that you got when you got Rick Pitino in the first round because you know he's licking his chops.
Yeah. So my question to you is: do you give Gonzaga a legit shot to make it to the Final Four? I know
Yes.
they it's hard for me to go with Gonzaga. Um, I still have bruises and scars from our game in 2017, but um, okay. So Gonzaga is a legit possibility to make to the Final Four.
I just went on Seattle radio before I went on with you guys, and they hate Carolina. FYI, they really like. If you want to find another team outside of Duke or State that hates Carolina, go talk to a Gonzaga fan because they do not like North Carolina. They were enjoying asking me about the NIT and things like that, and I was like, okay, all right, let's get to the basketball. But they tend to think or seem to think that this team is a title type team. They like being a 3 seed. They were gassing it up. And like I said, if you watch them, the WCC title game against St. Mary's, they pressed the majority of the game. And I like Gonzaga when they press, when they push the tempo. They kind of remind me of a Carolina team of the past era. So I think Gonzaga checks a lot of boxes. Drew Timme is the classic guy to kind of be the anchor of that team, but the real star of their team to me is their big man off the bench. His name is Ben Gregg with 2 G's, and he's a very Zach Collins type player. It's kind of similar to the 2017 team where it's like Karnowski was the face, right, of their bigs, but Zach Collins I was a lot more afraid of, right? When Zach Collins was out there, I was like, okay, let's get to Isaiah, drive at him, please drive at him. But Gonzaga could win the title this year, and then Mark Few can do his victory lap for the first time.
That is going to cover all the 4 regions. I have a couple just general questions that we could all touch on. The first question is, Tate, you could start. Who is the first 1 seed to go down?
Oof, that's a great question. I think this is it goes against what I've been telling other people, but I think the first 1 seed to go down is going to be Kansas. I think Kansas in the second round against Arkansas. That feels like a must bust special. It feels like Kansas is going to have some questions with Bill Self, and I think Arkansas, pounces on that opportunity. And there's a name that we all learn in that game. His name is Jordan Walsh. You might not know him now, but you're going to hear a lot of Charlie Villanueva comps, and that's unfair to him, but he's a great defensive basketball player and a guy that's going to be in the NBA. So I think Kansas goes out first.
Justin, what about you?
I hate to do it because it's my hometown, but I see Houston being the first number 1 to go down. I have them going against Auburn, and the games I've watched Auburn, I haven't been a complete buyer of them. But like how fiery Bruce Pearl is, especially going into the NCAA tournament, and then a couple of those little guards that they have, like how just if they get any kind of run or start feeling good about themselves at all, like it can be a snowball for the other team. I don't know. I see Houston going down, which it might be so false. They might beat Auburn by 40, but I don't know. I think Houston's going to be the first one.
Yeah, Auburn's scary.
Yeah, we're all going different. I'm going Purdue. It's Purdue. In my mind, Purdue has no chance.
So who do you have them losing to? Do you have them losing to Memphis or
Memphis?
Duke?
Yeah,
I think Memphis is the most fun for everybody.
Most likely an 8-9 is going to catch a 1. Yeah, I feel like it happens almost every year. It's just who is it going to be? I think the McCaffrey Pearl matchup is exciting in the first round to see who gets Houston. But Purdue, there's just something about Purdue, and it's the guards. I say there's something. It's the guards for Purdue. But Tate, starting with you, who would you say is this year's Cinderella, the double-digit seed, most likely to make a deep run into this tournament?
That's a good question. I also want to point out that Memphis should not be an 8 seed. That's such a joke. Memphis should be like a 5 seed or a 6 seed at worst, but that's neither here nor there. There's been a lot of high seeds that I try to talk myself into. I don't really have many. My bracket's a little bit chalk. I like Louisiana. as a 13 seed. I think Louisiana could actually upset Duke in the second round, kind of like what South Carolina did, throw them off the scent a little bit. They're kind of a bunch of good old boys, and they're also like 24, 25, played at Arizona. Like Jordan Brown, their starting center, he played at Arizona, then he played at Nevada, then he transferred to Louisiana. So this is his third school. I don't know. Louisiana is one of those teams. They have my attention. And then there's a program that always has my attention just because of the talent that they bring in. I don't really trust their coach as much, but USC. I'm close to USC. I go to USC practices sometimes just because I want to see who the hell they bring in. And they always have like 3 or 4 absolute freaks that you're just like, who is this guy? Where did you get? Like when I saw Evan Mobley for the first time, I'm like, who is this man? What is going on? How is he not at North Carolina? Who do I need to call? So USC is a 10 seed. I think they upset Michigan State. I worry about Marquette against USC's length. So I think USC is a team that could do it as well.
Justin, what about you? Who's the double-digit seed most likely to make a run?
I think I'm gonna be very, I think, hypocritical in this situation because shout out Marcus Page. I think I'm going with Pittsburgh. The more I think about it, I gotta show ACC love. I don't know what Tate's talking about. Big 12, Big 10. I don't know what he was saying earlier.
Yeah, we love the ACC,
but I don't know. I just think obviously the first round matchup against Iowa State. I think they could get through that. I haven't watched a ton of Xavier. I think Xavier gets through Kennesaw State. I've seen them play against my brother's team a couple times. I think they get through them. So I haven't seen Xavier too much. But I think just watching them, like them in that playing game, what was it last night? I guess. I don't know. I think they could surprise a few people. So I'll go with Pittsburgh.
I like that.
Quick rant. The ACC having 5 teams. This is not me advocating Carolina should have got into the tournament, but 5 teams is disrespectful for the ACC when they had 3 Elite 8 teams last year, 2 Final Four teams. I know the committee's not supposed to judge what teams did the year prior, but it feels like at some point the ACC has earned enough respect. Tate, I think you need to be the Paul Feinbaum of the ACC. Yeah. That's why the ACC is only getting 5 teams. We don't have a Paul Feinbaum.
Yeah, we're a bunch of pushovers. We let the analytics guys bully us. We do not fight them with numbers. We fight them with feelings, which I think is what's hurting our argument. You know what I mean? I tap myself on the chest. I'm the one that's fighting them with feelings. I want to fight them in real life, but I don't know where they are. They won't come from behind their computers. In general, I feel for the ACC. I thought when NC State was the 11 seed against Creighton, and maybe this is why I'm not a bracketologist either. I thought Carolina was going to be a 10 seed when I saw NC State as an 11 seed. I really did. I thought that was going to lead to Carolina being, kind of maybe even in the USC Michigan State game. I thought Carolina might be that 10 seed. But that's neither here nor there. They didn't win the games to give them that position. But the ACC should never have only 5 teams in the tournament, and Clemson should be absolutely. I mean, they should be rioting. They should be in Indianapolis right now, outside, just going insane because I've never seen a team get screwed over so hard. And they blew out NC State 3 times. And look, congratulations. I'm happy for Kevin Keats. He's been nothing but nice to me. I like their team. They're a fun team. I like the sunglasses. We get it. We like it. But NC State's just the better PR of Carolina. We all know this, right? They just had a better PR team this year. And Clemson beat them 3 times handily. And I watched it every single time. And the fact that they're not in the tournament is a joke. And I don't know who's supposed to be fighting for the ACC. If it has to be me, I'll do my best, but no one's going to listen to me. So we need somebody. I'm yelling at Bubba Cunningham, somebody in the room, fight for us. Fight for us.
Help. Going back to the Cinderella, I'm going to have to redo my bracket because I had Drake in the Elite 8, but now I have Miami in the Final 4. So something's got to give. And I'm not one of the multiple bracket guys. Don't want to get started on that, but one bracket. But right now, I would say Drake is the most likely to make an Elite 8 run. But
Drake. They just got a bad matchup. Like Drake's better than a 12 seed. Like Drake should be a 10 seed. That's all the seeding's a little bit off in my opinion. But also I'm not on the committee. So what can I do?
And then we'll conclude the podcast with everybody going through their final four teams and then giving their national championship matchup and then national champion. Tate, do the honors.
Yeah, I got Arizona coming out of the South, just like in 1997. That's the last time they came out of the South. I think they're going to beat Alabama in the Elite Eight. And then I think they're going to play Marquette and Shaka Smart, in Houston in the Final Four. And then I think on the other side, Miami, Jim Larinaga, they're going to play Kansas. And that's going to be a great game. I think Kansas is going to win. I think Arizona is going to win. I think Arizona is going to play Kansas. I think we're going to get a lot of conversation about Kansas being the first repeat since 2007 when Florida did it. And then all of a sudden, Arizona gets it done because they have a better front court, and Kansas doesn't have the depth. So there you go. I got Arizona winning it all.
Justin, what about you?
Okay. So I've got Arizona making it past Alabama. I've got my sleeper team, Kansas State, right there. I've got Arizona playing against Kansas State. And then I've got a Texas and Kansas matchup again. I don't know how that's going to go, but I have Texas making it out of that game. And then I have Kansas State making it out of the Arizona game. So, and then I already said I got Kansas State going all the way. Go Tang. So I'm either going to be a genius or I'm going to be an absolute moron when it comes to this bracket. So, but yeah, that's who I got.
Tate, why has Texas matched up so well with Kansas this year?
I mean, it's just because they're kind of like recruiting the same kid. It's kind of like how Texas matches up so well against North Carolina. Every time we would play Texas, it felt like it was the Spider-Man meme. It was like, oh, that guy, I accepted my scholarship before him, and now he's mad that I got to go to Carolina and he didn't, and now he's trying to take it out on me in this one game, and then he's gonna play like ass the next 5 games. Like, I saw Kerwin Roach do that to Carolina. You know what I mean? Like, I watched that live in person.
So true.
And it's fine. And I watched it in the Maui Invitational in 2020 when they played each other. And I saw Matt Coleman hit the shot to beat Carolina, right? And Matt Coleman's like, y'all should have taken me. I'm like, can we start taking these guys? Like, we just put them on the bench. Stop letting them go to Texas. So I think Kansas has a little bit of that same thing going on. So it's a little bit of, guys wanted to play at Kansas and now they're mad. So they play harder.
A side note about that Texas-North Carolina game. There was one game since starting at Inside Carolina that we have live streamed our reactions for a watch along, and it was that Texas North Carolina game. It was in a 4-box watching the game at different points. Me, Justin, Kenny Williams, Marcus Page, all reacting to that buzzer beater.
Yeah, that was. Oh yeah, the Asheville game. Yeah, that was insane. That was the race to 69 too. That was like it was like on brand. I had like people yelling. There was no fans in there either, right? Because it was the pandemic, so it was like 15 people in there. Roy's just got like his head down in his hands, and then like one of the operations guys like yelling at me. He's like, "Race to 69." I'm like, I hate this guy. Like, get this guy out of here. Oh man, that was terrible.
To conclude it, I'll give my final 4. I have Alabama coming out of the South. I had Marquette coming out of the East. I switched it because I feel a Duke run is inevitable. So I'm hedging. I'm hedging my happiness because I'm in all these prize pools. So if Duke makes a run, at least I could hope for some money, either hope for some money or hope for a Duke loss. But
right.
My cheering interest during this tournament is Oral Roberts, Tennessee, Louisiana, the winner, and then just keep kind of going on from there. Right. I have Texas coming out of the Midwest, and then UCLA coming out of the West. I stuck with UCLA, kind of like you, Tate. They were my champion before Clark got hurt, but I'm going to stick with them. And then in the championship game, I have Alabama versus Texas, and Alabama coming out on top. I think Alabama just has a little too much talent. I think they're the best team I've seen, and I think from every team I've watched, I think Alabama has a gear that other teams don't have.
I agree with that. I think they have the highest ceiling, and what's the irony of it all is that Carolina should have beaten them. That is, I think that is something that's going to break my brain the entire offseason. That they had so many chances to win that game, and now Alabama is on their path to a national championship. Make it make sense. It doesn't.
But appreciate everybody who has watched or listened to this. Happy tournament eve. Happy March Madness to everybody who's still going to choose to celebrate. I'm choosing to celebrate college basketball. I love the sport, love the game. But appreciate everybody watching or listening. Appreciate Justin. And then, of course, appreciate Tate for coming on. Really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Yep, appreciate
Appreciate
y'all.
you, man.